Chapter 33. Hazard in the Desert. Almost 2 full weeks had gone by since Marcus left Mengarovi to embark on a journey to Rokan, Malakai's capital city, at the other side of the Doran Desert. It was supposed to be the start of a new life, one that would see him break free from his hereditary chains and claim his spot in the realm as his own person. Back home, he had everything he wanted and plenty more. His entire life he had been regarded as a prodigy, a star, high up in the sky that shone as brightly as Asia Celestine. He was the oldest child of 2 living legends, the heir to Mengarovi, and the next in line to lead the Bloodthorn clan to glory. He was one of the 4 commanders of O'Neara's army, with over 8,000 soldiers under his command. It was only a matter of time before he would have risen to the rank of a master. He had everything anyone could have ever wanted, and let it all slip through his fingers. It was never his own wish to leave behind all that he knew. Not really. He was quite comfortable, swinging on the pendulum of familiarity, living day in, day out, knowing the precise rhythm of his life. He never should have listened to Cato, who always knew exactly how to get under his skin, whether it was intentional or not.
All you need now is someone to share your life with, create a family and the like. Then, I'm sure you'll finally be fulfilled.
His friend had casually nudged into a conversation a few months ago. At the time, he simply shrugged it off. After all, what would someone like Cato of Moonshield know what it meant to have a family? But without realizing, the remark kept gnawing on him like a persistent itch that just wouldn't be relieved. It stung especially because he knew that Cato wasn't wrong. Marcus was 23 years old. He had never been in a romantic affair with someone for longer than 2 months. That was to say that he had a girlfriend once when he was 19, and that relationship only lasted for 50-something days. And as Cato remarked, yet again sharp as a hammer,
Any relationship that can be counted by the number of days is no relationship at all.
it wasn't the lack of attention that hampered his prospect of love. He was handsome, talented, successful, and famous. It was rather that romance simply never held any importance to him. And because of that, he was hopelessly out of his element when it came to interactions with the opposite sex. Or perhaps it was the other way around. It could very well be that he never prioritized romance because he had always been awkward around girls. Who could say with absolute certainty whether it was day or night that came into existence first? Not that it mattered. The conclusion remained the same. He never made an effort to dabble his toes in the game of courtship. And now he had reached an age where being single was starting to raise eyebrows. People even started questioning his sexuality behind his back. At times it seemed like everyone else was more concerned with his romantic affairs than he himself was. He never understood what the big deal was. He found other enjoyments in life. So what? Cato was unwed and no one batted an eye. But deep down he knew that he was not the same as Cato, and that the Knight family, if it could even be called that way, most certainly did not carry the same weight as the Bloodthorn clan. Besides, Cato had Asia. So, when his father and the Grandmaster offered him a proposal for an arrangement, he waved them off with a nervous chuckle. His mother, however, urged him to at least consider the proposition. She expressed her wish for him to find his own path in life, instead of living as a near copy of his father. The remark irked him even more than the nonsense about his love life, because Cato, who else, had said similar things before. Of course it had to be the Lord of Nothing to tell him he was just a Mycon Bloodthorn without the accolades. But Cato wasn't alone in this. Even his baby sister had thrown similar rubbish at him during their many heated arguments. And so did Asia, although he was sure that calling him Marcon was none other than Cato's brilliant suggestion. But without question, the absolute worst of all was that even father seemed concerned with their uncanny likeness. Not only in physical attributes and personality, but life trajectory as well. The longer he thought about it, the more he persuaded himself that marrying some unknown girl from a nation he had never even been to might actually be the best course to take. He did want to have a family of his own one day, and if he wasn't going to find the right river to swim in on his own, he might as well try to stay afloat in the one he's getting thrown into. And so he eventually accepted the proposal for an arrangement, if only to prevent more people from meddling with his personal life. Though ultimately, it wasn't the prospect of love that made him agree. As always with Marcus Bloodthorn, it was duty. His marriage to King Ephra's youngest granddaughter, Zephyra Mantarok, would secure a long sought-after alliance between Onira and Malachi. Many attempts had been made throughout the years to solidify the friendship between the two political juggernauts, but by the will of fate, an official bond never came to fruition. And this time, it would seem that Ava didn't even bother to consider it an attempt. He was sure that the holy goddess spectated his blunderous journey through the desert, either with great indifference or great amusement. Marcus gazed up at the cloudless sky, baring his fangs at the sun that had already passed its zenith. It meant he had now officially spent more than 14 days in the desolation of the Doran. 2 weeks of sadness. Nothing went the way it was supposed to go. He was told that the journey would take about 4 days on horseback, but since Marcus had a strong aversion to horses, or any animals for that matter, the 4 days on horseback changed to 12 days on foot. He knew that the journey was going to be tough, but not once had he considered the possibility of dying in this oversized litter box. 2 weeks ago, he entered the Doran with Stanik Frieslung, a guide from Grimshire who supposedly knew the desert like the face of his own mother. That could very well have been the case, but Marcus never got the chance to find out. Stanik died a few days ago. At first, the guide only complained about a mild stomachache. It didn't even seem all that serious, really. He took a dump, laughed it off, and continued onward without giving it a second thought. But even before the day came to an end, his skin turned greyish-blue from head to toe, and he quickly descended into a feverish delirium. By the time night fell, Stanik drew his final breath under a cold, star-filled sky.
"Keep going east. You will reach Rokan within 2 days,"
the guide had said in his final moments of clarity. But what he forgot to mention was that the remainder of the journey would take more or less 2 full days on horseback. And that last part was crucial. Not that Stanik could be blamed for forgetting the fact he didn't enter the desert on a ride. After all, he had trekked through the sandbox hundreds of times over the course of a few decades, but his journey with Marcus was the first time he made the crossing on foot. Or it would have been anyway. Unfortunately for the guide, Marcus had been adamant about it. He absolutely refused to get on the back of a horse. If his relationship with women was to be seen as poor, then his relationship with animals should be considered bankrupt. A mutual disdain was the only connection that bound them together. Unlike his baby sister, who seemed to magnetize critters in all shapes and sizes, he only managed to repel them. It was as if all animals were able to sense the vicious predator that lurked beneath the surface and instantly panic the moment they notice his presence. And so, without someone to guide him through the desert, the journey that would have taken him just over 4 days on horseback or 12 days on foot got extended indefinitely. Marcus gave Stanik a proper burial and continued travelling to Malachi on his own. He followed the sunrise as he was told and walked in a straight line until the sun sank under the dunes at his back. He did so twice and expected to arrive at the gates of Rokan before the sun would make its descent, but that was exactly 4 days ago. He had been travelling east for what seemed like forever since the night of Stanik's passing, but all he ever saw was sand, sand, and endlessly more sand. Even with his sensory excellence, he never caught a whiff of civilization. Last night, he made the decision to continue travelling under the guidance of a crescent moon. Crossing the Doran at night was something that Stanik had strongly advised against. There were too many risks involved, and not being able to see the hazard in the desert was perhaps the biggest danger of all. But Stanik was not the same as Marcus. Stanik did not possess the eyes, nose, and ears of a bloodthorn. Besides, Marcus was left without a choice. His last bit of food had already been consumed the day after Stanik died, and he was certain the remaining water in his flask would only last him 1 more day, tops. Technically, he wasn't wrong. 1 more day, tops. As the sun scorched his skin to a crisp, He looked over his shoulder to find out the footprints he left behind were already buried underneath a layer of fine, cream-coloured grains. Erased and forgotten, as if they had never existed at all. He was determined not to suffer the same fate, but at the same time realised that he was hopelessly lost. He licked his cracked lips in an attempt to get them moisturised, but the dry papillae on his tongue made the lick feel like a sheet of sandpaper rubbing against a grater. The friction produced a thin stream of blood, and whether it flowed from his tongue or lips, he wasn't able to tell, nor did he have the mind to care. He eagerly sucked it up all the same, grateful to feel the liquid down his throat. And just as despair was about to sink in, he heard something that instantly lit up his ruby eyes with a glimmer of hope. A snake was slithering along the side of a dune up ahead. No ordinary person would have been able to pick up the sound, but to Marcus the dry scales gliding over the fine grains sounded like a millstone that was grinding wheat. He didn't hesitate for longer than a second and sprinted for the dune. Before the snake even had the chance to realise it was being hunted, Marcus snatched up its head and crushed the skull inside his palm with one swift movement. Immediately he started tearing into his prey. Raw and uncut, guts, bones and all. With the snake's tail still hanging from his lips, he turned his attention to the distant horizon with a frown attached to his face. While his eyes only saw sand, sand and endlessly more sand, his nose picked up another scent that sent his senses into a hopeful excitement. He slurped up the last bit of his meal and flared his nostrils to take in a deep breath. The frown quickly transformed into a grin. He smelled people. About a dozen of them. Maybe his luck finally began to turn. That group of people could very well prove to be his only chance to escape the sand coffin. He needed to make sure that he would be seen by the travelling group. Even though a chance encounter in the Doran never came without risks, or so he was told by someone who didn't possess the martial dominance of a bloodthorn, the opportunity was simply too good to pass up. Surely they would know the way to Rokan, or just about anywhere else really. And if they intended to cause trouble, well, they would have a very grumpy bloodthorn to deal with. He climbed to the top of the highest dune he could find, unclasped the hooded cloak from his shoulders, and started waving it like a flag. The riders, who were no more than a few tiny specks on the horizon, immediately stopped for a brief moment before changing their direction. They then galloped toward him at full speed, leaving behind a sandy cloud that spread into the air like a beige flame.